Hi everyone. Today I'm back with Tara. You may have watched our first conversation and I hope you enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. And I said to Tara, I really want to continue to talk about this authenticity thing because I think it's a really massive topic with lots of layers and lots of complexity involved in it. And so, hi Tara.
Hi, excited for this conversation. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And I was telling her that it's such a vast topic, and I see so many layers that I had trouble actually distilling the whole thing and like, oh, this is the aspect that I want to talk about today, and so on. So, but we did. I finally managed to articulate the thing that maybe we could start with. And one of the things that you said in your video was that sometimes we may feel like we're speaking our truth, whether it's in public or whether it's to friends, family, or whatever. And that might even feel like true or seem like it's true, sound like it's true. But then if there is any kind of movement going on beneath the surface that has to do with our fears of criticism or fear of rejection or fear of abandonment or some kind of prosecution that's not been seen and resolved, then we're still going to be projecting this, whether we're aware of it or not. And the funniest bit is not really funny because obviously that experience is not funny. But what I'm trying to say is that the interesting part about it is that then people tend to respond to that which we're projecting, which is underneath, as opposed to what we're actually saying. So I find this really fascinating. So can we start from just chatting about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a big learning experience for myself. I'll give an example of my firsthand experience and then someone I recently worked with because this came up in the conversation in the session and it was a it was the same but slightly different slightly different circumstance. So I'm going to give both because I think they're both very valuable. And with mine, when I was, I'll give an example of the relationship with my mother. So when I started to work in the spiritual domain, I started to read tarot and I was learning deeply about numerology and tarot and I was talking about it a lot. And this was when, so in my, I think I touched on this in our last episode where I spoke about moving back to my mom's place. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last episode when I was going through the dark night of the
Nope.
soul.
No, I don't think you have. But if
Yeah,
I
so it
may have
was
missed it.
yeah, it's okay. So I'll just touch on it lightly about it was over 5 years ago, excuse me, when I started going into the dark night of the soul and everything had bottomed out in my life. So I was making horrible choices. I was desperate. Like I was clinging on to basically anything that would come my way without any standards or any boundaries, or it was awful. So it basically ran its course when I had no other options other than to go to my mother's place to take a time out. I had no money left. I mean, like, not even left. It was like under the dirt. And I had no other option but to go to my mother's. And I didn't want to. My mother, the relationship with my mother was, she was my greatest teacher in my life. We had a very difficult relationship. And actually, I remember seeing a psychologist when I was 30 years old. And after a few sessions, and the psychologist was actually a family friend, and she even told me that I should divorce my mother so you can go through the process of emancipation, is that what it's called? Like where you can go through that. And she literally was really suggesting that I divorce my mother because it was so bad and it had such a heavy impact in my life. And there was part of me that I kind of wanted to, but there was just this little part of me that was saying, no, I don't know if I should. And even as much as I hated her, I mean, I couldn't even function around her in my early years. but there was still part of me that just was like, no, I don't know if that's completely right. And now I know why. And so at this time, when again, I had nowhere else to go, I had no money left, I had nothing, like, again, under the dirt, going into the dark night of the soul. And the only option I had was to go to my mother's. And so I went to my mom's, and that's where I feel part of the reason was for me to heal the relationship with my mother, which it now is very much at peace, mostly within me. So that was huge. But the other part I learned was how I felt within myself reflected on the relationship dynamic between the two of us. So because I had such low worth, but I was so confident about myself being a really good reader and really good at what I do, and I know I can be successful, and I know I have all this to offer, but there was still a part of me that was so insecure and doubted myself and feared putting myself out there because of all these wounds and whatnot. When I went to tell my mom that, oh, I'm starting a YouTube channel and I'm going to be successful and I think I'm in my zone and I'm like meant to do this, and she would criticize me, she would make fun of me, she wouldn't take me seriously because I wasn't taking myself seriously. Even though I knew, part of me, I knew that this is my path and I want to do this and I'm really good at it, but there was still this deeper part within me that didn't believe in myself. And that deeper part came with all those wounds of abandonment, annihilation, the persecution, the whatever, the pile that has seeped into my unconscious. It's lived in there. And this is the trick about this shadow work, our shadows, the parts of ourselves that we can't see, even though we believe in ourselves and we put ourselves out there and we try really hard and we know we can do it, but there's still something in us that is echoing these beliefs in our outer environment. So people pick up on our body posture, on the way that we talk, on our energy, and all these signals are being sent out without us seeing it or understanding it, because we're saying what we feel is our truth and what's right and what will work and what will maybe make us feel smart and accepted and loved and valued. But if we don't feel that deep, deep, deep within ourselves, and if we haven't come to terms within ourselves, then it's not going to resonate as a whole. It'll be fragmented. And so people will pick up on that. So my mother was responding to how I felt about myself, not what I was saying. I was coming out there and saying, oh, this is so great. I'm excited. I got 1,000 followers. I got 2,000. I got 10,000. I got 20,000. She didn't give a shit about any of it. She didn't, nothing. Like, I was like crickets, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why can't you like see what I'm doing? Didn't matter. So over time, when I started to work on this and deepen the relationship with myself and work through my layers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, now she's seeing me more, but it's not because I want to be seen. It's because I am me and I accept myself fully, and I'm not trying to, I could care less what she says, and I could care less about anything. It's just I'm at peace within myself and I'm showing up fully for myself. And so because I have that now, the authentic me has come out more. She sees that and she responds to it completely differently than before. So yeah, that's how it works.
Can you talk a little bit more about that process, and when did you actually realize that when did you actually realize that it's the change in you that was actually affecting the dynamic in such a massive way?
Well, excuse me, it really came from doing the deep, deep stuff, like really starting to observe my patterns and my beliefs, like really getting into the work I talk about, especially the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln, The Messages of the Body. It's this massive, huge dictionary of, there are two that I have. And one of them is for the body, and then the other one's psychological patterns. And I just like really opening up to this work and seeing how I'm responding to life and what I'm being triggered by, and also understanding. It took a long time, honestly, to figure this out, because you can't be taught this. You have to go through the process in order to feel it and to understand where you're like. I feel when we're children, when we're moving on and progressing and evolving into adulthood, we were born so entangled and enmeshed and attached to the mother and to the father, to the outer, right? And so we're used to functioning that way. And so when we become older, we still have those ingrained patterns of responding to the world externally. It affects us internally, but we lose ourselves in these situations. Like, we completely, the more and more we become affected by external events, like, that person did that, I can't believe they did that, God, I feel awful, because they just activate all these horrible feelings, but we basically attach it to that person or to that situation, when all they're doing is showing something within ourselves that's still there, that needs to be looked at. So it takes a lot of work to shift the lens, to look at ourselves a bit differently, and it's hard to do, because our ego, our hard wiring is just wants the familiar and wants to be right and wants it this way. And my ego was so strong. I had the strongest. I still do sometimes. It shows up, and but like, looking back, I was like, wow, like, I was really living in such a state of like illusion, essentially, right? And really stuck on my beliefs of what I thought was right, and things have to be this way, and I wouldn't budge. And so it really did take a lot of this inner wrestling and facing myself in so many ways. And through the process, I mean, I was shifting in and out of realities. I think I also posted a video on psychosis, the things I experienced through that, which I feel was shattering the illusions within myself, which really it deters people, because it's like, it's really foreign going into this inner landscape of self. It really is. So it takes quite a lot of time. But the more I kind of, I felt the reason why I was at my mom's place, at first I was very angry about it. I think I was angry for about a year. and then that kind of faded away when I was really getting into this inner exploratory phase. And then I started understanding, I'm like, I know why I'm here. But my ego was still pissed and didn't want to face the reality of it, like the bigger reality of it, and
Of course.
wanted to move out and wanted to. So I moved to Vancouver, which was like a complete disaster. And it wasn't like it was right or wrong. That actually was a very crucial time too, where it brought up a lot. But the kind of, I don't know how else to say this, but the worse I got, the better things became. So the worse I went with it, like like, I got to a point where things were so out of control emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. Like, I was just like ripping this shit apart, but I was also like really messed up through the process. But I kept going because there was a part of me that was like just pulling me through it, right? I had no choice. I had no other way of working with it other than keep going, keep going into it, you just over and over. Was it masochistic behavior? I really was feeling that. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep like
No,
going?
listen, I'm laughing. I'm laughing, but this is no laughing matter. Like, once you're in it, there's nothing to laugh,
Oh,
about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
totally. But yeah, looking back, yeah, exactly. So anyway, it was simply through that process, because when the cracks of our light starts to shine through, that's when we get those points of illumination. That's where we start to realize that, oh gosh, like, this is what it's about, and I'm changing my reality and I'm changing my life. Because at the beginning, when I was at my lowest point, where I had to move to my mom's, I was basically telling the universe that I am done. And I've had to say it over and over and over again. I do not want these kind of people in my life. I do not want to live like this. I do not. And I kept saying it over. But in order for me to actually follow through with it, I had to dismantle the stuff that was making me do it in the first place. So I had to go into, well, why did I construct my entire life the way I did? I had to understand that first to dismantle it and go into the, well, I want something better. Well, what is that? If I don't know, if all I've known is this over here, then what does that even look like? And so this whole process has been just an unraveling. And in that process, the big component was my mother. And that was the one of the foundational points of all of like our, like my feelings of rejection and abandonment. And I mean, it does go into past life, and it's old for me. I can feel it, and I've kind of, yeah, it carries deep wounds. But what I've also talked about is understanding, you don't have to follow. Some people are interested in past life regression. Some people aren't. It's totally fine. But even looking back in history of what has happened historically to us as people, as humans in this planet, the web of intricacies that are passed down through our family, through generational, through our bloodline, through society. If you want to go into past life, there's that. But these beliefs get carried into the family structure. And so when you're a child, you're playing a part in that story, but you just don't know it. So it hurts even more because you don't have the opportunity to realize it. You're just in it. But you're partaking in that story because you're part of that wound, or part of the conditioning, or part of the beliefs. And in that story, it's forming around your own beliefs as you move older and get older, as a child too. And so looking back, when I was young, I know I played a part in it because I would overreact to a narcissistic parent in such a way that was visceral and emotionally unstable. I created some of those experiences as well because of the way I was responding, the way I was feeling. So it's all like, when you really get out of it, it's all this web of projections and mirroring and emotional connections and disconnections, and not. So we're all doing this with one another at any given time. So after realizing all of this and seeing it, that's when the relationship started to really shift. And also, in all honesty, me standing in my power and being confident with myself. Like, it wasn't just about my mother. She played a crucial role in it, but it was about me and bringing it all back into me so I can feel confident with my boundaries, with my voice, with who I am, with what I'm doing, with what I believe in. And that's at the root of it all. It's all us. This web, this whole life really is a projection and a reflection of this, what's happening within ourselves. So that was the biggest eye opener. And actually, if I can jump into one quick, because I wanted to mention the guy who I was working with as well. And I feel this example was really great as well. It was a little slightly different, but the same. We've been having some sessions last, I think it was a week or two ago. We were talking about the relationship with his mother. And as soon as he started sharing it, I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what's happening. And so he was feeling, we got really deep into the work, and he was feeling that his mother wasn't seeing him or recognizing him for who he is and what he was doing. And it's been an ongoing story. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? And how does it make you feel about your sensitivities? Because he's a very intuitive person, and he has so much to offer the world. And I said, well, how does that make you feel about you and what you have to offer the world? And he said, I hate it. I hate my sensitivities. I hate this part of myself, this side of myself. And that's what happens when we feel that there's a part of us that, again, we do this unknowingly because when we were young, this is how we're conditioned to feel in response to the mother, in response to the father, in response to the outer world. And when we don't get that validation, that feedback, then we feel that something's wrong with us. And over time, we begin to reject part of ourself. And that can show up in many different ways. And in his case, he started hating this sensitivity that he had, which is going to be a huge component of his path, is massive. And so for this person to literally shut down and want to like get rid of it, which is part of the person, it shows the dynamic of what's playing out in the relationship of the mother. So it's not the mother, it's ourselves that needs to bring it back into ourselves. And this person had a conversation with their mother that they have never had before, and now the mother's starting to change because he's starting to accept more of himself and be able to have those hard conversations with his mother that he never had before. So that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, Tara. I mean, I find it extraordinary that honestly, when we truly, first of all, see people as they are, which, like, for me, that's been massive because I didn't realize how much I've been looking at people through the lens of what I wanted or needed them to be, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it doesn't matter if it was a sister, a mother, a father, or whoever, you know? And I still had that going on, even though I was already very aware. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm totally fine with exactly as they are. And, you know, I don't care. But actually, there was just so much hidden sort of expectation, you know? And actually, like I said, expectation and not seeing people fully as they were. So there was constantly just expecting them to be someone else or to act differently or toward me or something like that. But again, none of that I wasn't aware of that at all, you know. So every time I didn't get it, obviously I felt, you know, uncomfortable. But I just find that it's almost like an alchemical process, this accept that when you see people as they are for the first time, literally as they well, like without judgment, you know, and without those expectations and without that agenda, and then you've done that work in yourself and you recognize why we are the way we are and you see the kind of innocent nature of the personal, you know, even if it doesn't feel innocent at all at times, you know, then you don't even have to say anything. You literally don't even have to have conversations with those people. It's just the way you show up
Mm-hmm.
when you hang out that they start responding differently, you
Yeah.
know? And of course, you know, I talk only a little bit about it in the book because to me that's like that wasn't like the most important part or like the most impactful. But there can be a grief that comes with that. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like when you start seeing people actually as they are, and like I said, not through the lenses of what you wish they were, and so on. You know, there can be a process of grief, and in my case, with my mother specifically, it was almost like she disappeared for a moment. It was almost like she died, even though it was just an idea of her that died, you know, that I held. Um, and so, you know, also I would spend so much time trying to kind of build and maintain bond, you know, because clearly needed that, you know, for a very, very long time. That when those attempts sort of naturally ceased. It wasn't like one day I decided, oh, I'm fucking done building the bond with my mother. You know, there's nothing like that. It was just literally something that, you know, when I came to that wholeness in myself, there was no need to have that bond anymore. It would have been lovely, like nothing wrong with the bond, but like it wasn't needed anymore on that kind of fundamental level. But that is not to say that at first it really felt like I lost my mother, you know, even though she was still there. And the other thing that really also struck me is I think we talked about it quite a bit in the first conversation that it's amazing when you realize how many beliefs you carry that you're not even aware of, or you're even triggered by the things in your mother or in whoever it is that's triggering you And yet you don't see that those very things, you literally, the things that trigger you in that person are very much in you.
Hmm.
So, like for example, I would always moan about the fact that she was stubborn. Like this would be the main thing, that she's so stubborn and she just needs to things the way she wants, and like that's it. And then I had to face the fact that I was literally no different.
Yeah,
You know? And that was
totally.
painful. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
obviously those are like little things, but I think it speaks to what you were saying. I think that it really takes willingness. And if we're in that kind of bubble of victimhood, and I say this in no judgment, and by which I mean just constantly pointing the finger at other person and constantly blaming them for the state of affairs, you know, then then it's very difficult then to burst that bubble. So I suppose my question is, what would you say to people? Because I know for the fact that I know so many people that this is an issue, with the connection with the mother or the connection with the family members, you know, and they will have parents that actually have behaviors that are not okay by any measure, and they might even change something in them and come to their wholeness, but like the parents are still doing things that are definitely not okay. Sometimes it's so easy to then kind of flip it around and exaggerate onto the other side. Oh, it's all on me now. And it's not like that. It's both, it works both ways. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's interesting. There's a fine line. And I just want to say one thing before I go
Mm-hmm.
into that one, because there was one other realization that I had. Actually, I think it's going to connect really well. Um, what I also realized is actually this is going to fully answer the question. I got it back. I was
Great.
like everything
Not
just
gonna
went to
lie.
like a million pieces all of a sudden. I was like, oh, there's like all these like ways of approaching it. Um, when I was again focusing on this belief work, like so understanding patterns and what gives us these beliefs and these perceptions and behaviors and whatnot. I was working on it with my mom. So my mom had some health conditions, and I would often read for. Actually, it was between my mentor and my teacher. She also worked with my mom, and then I started working with my mom. And when I was doing the work with my mom, and so this is basically the practice of going into the pattern of, well, basically finding the origin of a pattern that is causing a certain behavior or certain emotions and then a certain physical manifestation. So what's happening in your body as a result. So sort of using your body as a mechanism to understand the patterns within yourself and then finding the origin of where it began. So I was working with my mom through this practice, and I was starting to realize her story. And she was, when I would do some clearing work with her by identifying some of these patterns and the physical component in the body, she would start to talk about her childhood, and she was telling me things that were related to what we were going into. And I just began to have the most compassion towards her after hating her for most of my life. And I started to see her differently. Oh, I'm like getting semi-emotional
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
but it was just so honest, and for me to see her in that light rather than this mean, harsh, bossy woman who created so many problems in my life, I started to understand where she came from. And I started to see her pain and her suffering and her as a child, because we in this work is basically going back to the child of the origin of what happened to eventually manifest into a certain physical symptom, but also behaviors and perceptions and whatnot. So I, after the work, I just like something in me really shifted, and I was like, wow, I get it. Like I get why she's acting this way. I understand why she is this way. And there's also that shift of perception. So going back into your question, we have to remember that no matter what anyone does in our life, it doesn't matter. It's the only thing that's important is how we react to it and how we feel about it and how we feel about ourselves as a result. So people can do all their mean, nasty things as much as they want, and that's up to them. And my mentor and teacher, she would always say, it's none of our business what people do and what they're doing and how they're doing it and what they're saying and all these things. And if they like us or if they don't like us, it's none of our business. What matters is how we react to it. And so we can bring ourselves back into ourselves rather than losing ourselves in what other people are doing. So if there's a parent that's not going to change, and my mom is, my whole family's changing. I don't know if it was because, I don't want to say it's all because of my work. I don't want to say that. That's like too much, but I think there's part of it related. And I think I told you about Pluto in astrology, going back into astrology, being in my fourth house. So the house of Cancer.
Yes, yes,
And there has
yes.
been a lot of release work around stuff that I know is not mine. I'm like, there's no way I'm carrying this much shit. Like, there's just no way. Like, it's like coming in from all sorts of directions and depths and insanities. I was like, what did my family do in their lifetime? Like, to carry this
Yeah, because
freaking
I mean,
weight.
Pluto is always intense wherever it is in the chart, but like fourth house and then in Cancer,
Yeah.
then it's again connected to the mother and to like the most profound emotions, a sense of lack of sense of security, and all sorts of things. So, like, wow, congratulations on working through
No
that one, Tara.
kidding.
I'm not
Oh my,
kidding. Yeah.
it was like real heavy stuff. And so, like, I don't even know if, again, this work, I think I do feel there was some kind of correlation with the family because our whole family has also shifted. Like, we're all in a different place, like having way different conversations. And
Amazing.
it is, yeah. And so my mom is naturally spiritual. Like, she's very open-minded. She took me to new age stores when I was young. She's like all into that stuff. So we can have crazy conversations. People have very, very, very still difficult and probably will not change family relationships. You never know. Things can change. I see that more. I never thought my family relationships would ever change, but they did. Some won't, some will. But again, it is so important for us to understand how we feel about it and where we're giving ourselves, how we're giving ourselves to the situation, and how we can change for ourselves and not feel guilty about it, where we can take our power back and be okay with that and be okay with our boundaries and be okay with what is. So even my dad and I have a very special relationship. My dad is like a sentinel being. He's amazing, but he has his issues that he hasn't changed. And I don't know, over the last probably 15 years, I saw him declining his health because I just feel he gave up on life. I just feel he stopped trying. He didn't care about his diet. He would still drink. He was an alcoholic when I was young. He would just sit around and watch TV. And I would go visit him and I would be like, Dad, like, what are you doing? And I would try to like tell him to change and eat better or go exercise and trying to push all these things on him to like better his life. And he wouldn't. You can't lead with the leading the horse to water. You can't make a drink thing, right? So it just kept building up, and I would see his dementia starting to come in, and basically his body deteriorating. And it was really hard to watch because, seeing the whole picture of what they're doing to themselves and not being able to do anything about it was really tough. And I remember this one time he's now in assisted living, but I remember just before he went to assisted living, I was at his house visiting, and he was on medication for blood thinners, and I think he was on too much of this medication, and he was literally forgetting everything, and he was slowing down. He was getting really dizzy and disoriented, and cognitive dissonance, and it was really bad. And he kept locking his phone, and he would forget his password. So I would have to keep driving him to the phone store to get his phone unlocked. And I just was like, what is happening? Like, it's happening faster and faster. And And so I turned to him and I got so angry because I was like, how could you do this to yourself? Like, how could you get here to this point where you're literally wasting away and you don't even care? And I remember snapping at him once and I said, you're not even going to remember my name next year, because he was forgetting everything. And I just like, it was coming from a place of anger and I was so
Mm-hmm.
frustrated. And he turned around, he was so sweet and he said, yes, I will. And it was just like, oh God, my heart. Like, I just was like, what's going on? Like, I just had to snap out of it and just realize, you know what? I have to just love him and be there for him. I can't change him. I can't, it's not my responsibility. It's not my duty. I can't carry the burdens. I can't feel guilty because I'm not, so like I don't live in the same place as him,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel guilty that I'm not there more and I can't travel more and I can't be there more, but I also have to pay attention to
Yeah.
myself when I'm feeling that way. So it's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to carry the weight of him. It's not my responsibility, or it's not up to me to feel guilty because I can't be there so much when I have my life to focus on and I have stuff to
Mm-hmm.
go through. So it's really all about how we manage all of this and how we feel about ourselves and when we're losing ourselves in these dynamics, right? So that's, I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you totally answer the question. And also, again, I'm seeing so many sort of layers to this because I think, again, and I'm only speaking as always from like my experience, that like the to me that wholeness which we come to or stumble upon or reveals itself, like, I call it wholeness with capital W. It includes everything. It includes whatever reactions we're having. It includes all the times when we're triggered, all the discomfort that we feel. It includes all that. It embraces all that. So this is not about not having those experiences or
Yeah.
beating ourselves up for the fact that we have those experiences. So that's allowed, right? But it also includes everybody else's, right? So it also includes the stuff that we don't like in the people that we're around as well. And so I think when we can get to that point and be of genuine acceptance of that in ourselves, because I think, like you said, it's almost happens by default because once you have true acceptance of how things are as they are with you, however you experience things, then it almost like shifts automatically onto the other person. And there's this, like you said, the natural compassion that also comes out of that. And I think that wholeness also includes boundaries, which, at least in my experience, I found to be, I don't even think of those things as boundaries anymore. It's just whatever arises fresh in a moment, in a situation. So I don't go into like, oh, I have boundaries about this, about that, and about that. No, because I might be like today, it was such a emotional day. And my body was kind of experiencing what it was experiencing. And maybe today, let's say, if a friend or a sister, mother, or whoever would have some kind of, I don't know, go angry or something like that, I would have to set a boundary and be like, I'm out. I can't deal with it today, you know? But then maybe tomorrow I'm in a completely different place and I have no problem with their reaction, and we can sit and we can talk things through and maybe I can even be helpful or something like that. So, even those boundaries shift depending on like what's going on with me in a moment, right? But I think we're in real trouble when we're conflating understanding of why people are the way they are and even having compassion for that, genuine compassion and understanding, with tolerating certain behaviors, right? Because, and I think that it's part of that when we come to that wholeness, it can absolutely shift our dynamics with anyone for better, but it might not, right? So to me, the point is like, for as long as we need the dynamic to change in order for us to be whole, for as long as we need that person to be different in order for us to be whole, that's when we hit the wall, because it's like, that's right. So to me, the freedom is in not having those like, oh my God, it's, what was the quote that I've seen like years ago? It was like, you really love people when you set them free. Someone
Mm.
said it,
Yeah.
and to me, it's just so absolutely profound and true,
Mhm.
But like I said, it doesn't mean putting up, it doesn't mean tolerating unacceptable behaviors or whatever
Mm.
behaviors are not okay with you on a day, even, and I think that I just wanted to make it very clear. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Anything else that comes up around this?
Yeah, yeah, there was one more when you were just speaking, something else that came up, and this was on the relational landscape with more romantic relationships, but also actually it was a pattern in many areas, but it came up a lot with very close relationships. So because my mother had narcissistic tendencies. She was a narcissist. I was trying to say it lightly. She was a narcissist,
Full on.
full on. I had a tendency of attracting that in my life, of course, right? That's sort of how it goes. And I remember there was a business partnership that I had, and this was like the cataclysmic. This was 6 years ago, or maybe even 7 years ago, that really tilted me into this like massive shift in my life. But this person represented my mother and my father together, like the worst qualities almost amplified at me. And I saw it in that moment, which brought light to, again, this like sort of pattern that I was living in. And then I kept attracting very similar personalities in my life while I was going through this process of unraveling all my patterns and understanding myself. And I kept attracting. There was one relationship in particular that was another very heavy narcissistic relationship, but I didn't see it at the time because I had a blind spot to this behavior because I was also very familiar with it, until this person really showed this type of behavior. And then some of the things that they said about me, well, about like the relationship mostly, but it reflected on me because I now, at that point, I became very aware of this mirroring thing of like how people are mirroring us back at us. And what they said to me, I mean, it was like, it stung a lot, but I had taken time after it, and this person was super abusive and super emotionally unstable. And they said all this stuff to me, and I was like, it literally took me, I think, months to have my nervous system regulate after they were in my life because they were so aggressive, like super attacking,
Wow.
very violent. Which I was shocked that I'm like, how is this in my life after everything that I've like cleaned up and fixed in my
Right?
life? How is
Yeah.
this here? But then it made me realize that I still don't value myself. And it was very something specific that they said. Again, this person very aggressive, has all these very, abusive traits and whatnot. The way I turned it around was to understand why I was attracted to it in the first place. And it wasn't so much the pattern from the parent at that point, even though that was part of it, but it was mostly that I didn't value myself and I had very low self-worth that I wasn't facing. And so once I saw it in the context of this relationship and what they were projecting onto me and how they were talking to me and what they said about the relationship as well, it was truly a representation of how little I felt about myself and how little self-respect I had about myself. But again, I didn't see it, and I couldn't see it until I went through that. And I needed to go through that. I mean, I don't know why I have to keep going through things so intensely, but I guess that's the way I get it.
Pluto in
And
Cancer
it
would be
lands.
one of the clues.
Why does it have to be so strong? Anyway, I was really intense. And so it landed like it really, like I got it because it was like, those harder smacks of the
Yeah.
side of the head are like the biggest, like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, I got it, click. And I had to work on it for a while. And I did really, but I was so grateful for it because it made me see part of myself that I wouldn't otherwise, and I could work on that. And so I've regained more of myself because of it. So again, it's this loop that we can constantly find ourselves in that it's like, oh, there's another thing in me that I'm not seeing until, or I
Yep.
can't see until a circumstance will show me that part of myself. Then I go through it again and I bring myself back more into myself. And so we have to go through these conflicts and these very difficult relationships are our greatest teachers. If we see it
Absolutely.
that way, if we can work with it in a way of not being hard on ourselves, like we can sometimes look at ourselves as like being really hard on ourselves because of what we're going through. But it's again, being the observer in the situation of, okay, what is this actually trying to show about a part of myself that I haven't seen before? And then how can I strengthen that within myself to make myself more whole? So it's sort of like again, a constant loop that we can find ourselves in until we break the cycle. And we are in a
Yep.
time right now, I really feel that we are in a time where we get to break these cycles. That's all you need. And so it's messy and very liberating at the same, right? It's very complex, dynamic.
Messy and liberating, definitely. Definitely spot on. Definitely go
Yeah.
hand in hand, these
Yeah.
two. Um, so I don't know if we can enter another territory. It's not different. It's really what we started with, which is the authentic expression. Because I think, you know, I started with telling you how when I listened to your video, you talked about this bit where we think we speak our truth, but then there's this whole stuff happening underneath, and then
Mhm.
we're surprised that people are sort of not responding to our truth the way we thought they would because they're responding to the stuff that goes on underneath. And I think it connects to 2 points that I wanted to ask you about, which is one, I think, and again, speaking from experience, was not realizing that even though I always felt like I was very true to myself and authentic and open and honest and so on, and had even that kind of reputation, like amongst people, one of when I was thrown into this shadow work by basically not by choice, it's sort of just life threw me in it,
Yeah.
it was shocking for me to realize how much I would still curate my self image
Right.
in ways that were so subtle. So there were still masks, okay? I was still very much me. And to me, this is like the really fascinating bit because I was totally still very much myself. And simultaneously, there would be those masks. There would be the things that I was projecting because of how I wanted to be seen. But again, it was happening in ways that were so unbelievably subtle. And then no wonder, that kind of felt tiring, in a way, again, that I wasn't conscious, not just for the mind, psychologically, emotionally, but even physically, to keep on having to uphold whatever image that you want to project and then keep on curating it all the time. How many times I didn't even know that I was like saying yes to things that I didn't really want to say yes to, but I would because what will this person think of me? They will think I'm selfish, or they will not think you know the stories. Like I don't want to go into all the cliches about it, but like that's the gist, right? So I would like to just talk a little bit about that, like those masks, and those in the context of we're thinking we're speaking our truth, when in reality we're still either there's an agenda or there's something else playing out that isn't actually fully true and authentic, but it's some kind of projection or expectation or something like that that's hidden.
Yeah, well, you have to also consider that when we're in alignment more and more with our true self, there's no friction. There's no expectation, there's no striving, there's no pushing, there's no harshness. It is so smooth and it's so soft and subtle and easy. And even the way that we see life and the way we speak and the way we feel is easy. But we overcomplicate because of these masks that we wear. And I was watching, this is on an extreme level, but I was watching a video of, I think it was like some, I kind of once in a while like watching crime shows and stuff like that, just like whodunit type of things, you know?
Uh-huh.
And there was this one individual and they did something nefarious to make extra money. And that nefarious deed started piling up and piling up and piling up because once they started that chain of events of lying and deceit, they couldn't go back. So they had to keep lying more, a little bit more, and lying a little bit more, and doing this and doing that until and eventually they made a lot of money out of this and they lived this successful life and they had this persona and they were like buying cars and traveling and doing all these great things to, you know, show the world that they're successful and that they're someone and that they're, you know, part of society. But meanwhile, this dark lie that they had been covering up over and over and over again started growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually they got caught. And it was like a really bad, like really bad crime, like something that I was even shocked about. But when I was watching it, it was like, this is what we do within ourselves. You know, that was on the extreme side, of course, but this is what we do when we don't honor our boundaries. We you know, might create a certain environment to suit the story, or we might hold on to layers and layers of resentment and anger, and that gets projected over here, and then we have to cover that up and apologize over there. And we're constantly band-aid fixing and repairing and creating stories to protect ourselves or to align with a wound that we have or a story that we're creating in our life. And it's just this web of exhaustion, as you mentioned, because we're constantly trying to keep things in place. So we're like, you know, the plate spinning thing, like we're constantly trying to manage all of these expectations that we have on ourselves, or being seen to be valued, or not saying certain things because we don't want to hurt someone, or holding ourselves back and being defensive because we don't want to be hurt, because there are all these aspects of ourselves that we haven't seen truly within. So it becomes very exhausting, and we carry the weights of emotions just keep building up and building up and building up until we get sick, or until we blow up at someone, or until we sabotage ourselves or do something that will create chaos. So when we've understood this complexity and become real with what we're doing and who we are, and start to soften that relationship within ourselves, it just, all that noise goes away. And there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to prove. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to conceal. There's nothing to try to, like, a story to make, but we become very personified. There's over identification with the masks that we wear, right? So the mask that I am successful, that I am someone, that I am competent, because we never had that validation in early life. So we have to build that up within ourselves, but it becomes skewed and distorted to fit societal expectations. So it's not real and it's not authentic, but it feels real because we're just used to living behind that, or used to living with it. And the stronger that relationship becomes with that mask and that story that we create, the harder it is to see what we're doing and how we're living. And it just piles up and piles up and piles up until it's, you know, becomes something critical, like a health issue or getting arrested for doing something malicious.
Okay, so this is not going to be a very elegant segue, but there was the other bit that I took a note of when I listened to your video, which is then, because we talked about, you know, us being triggered for the reasons that have to do with us, but then you also spoke brilliantly about how speaking our truth, or all of a sudden even communicating boundaries that people around us have not been used to before,
Mm.
like that can be triggering to people, right? And then I don't know about you, but like, for me, I used to be so, I'm still, my body is still adjusting to this, but I've always been very sensitive to other people's tr being triggered, especially if they're angry. So if they responded with anger toward me, oh my God, that would just like it was completely dysregulate my nervous system. And so I suppose, I don't know what the question is. I think if you could talk a little bit about, because I know we don't have forever. So like, if you could talk a little bit about that is often the case, that when we start speaking our truth and are genuinely honest without expectations, or trying to impose anything, how that can be triggering to people. And then how, what's the healthy way of dealing with people being triggered by us, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's the other cost of authenticity. I think it was in that
Yeah.
video, right? So, yeah, I think it comes down to feeling safe. So it will coincide with what I mentioned about us returning to who we are, to authenticity, to truth, to purity, and feeling safe doing so, right? So there's part of us that feels unsafe being authentic and being true. And if we're not feeling safe within our body and within our true self, being authentic, and someone says something, or they attack, or they get triggered, then of course it's going to create a reaction within ourselves. But once we see this whole complexity and we've regained that sense of safety and trust within ourselves, that we are safe being our true self, and no matter how people are reacting outwardly or externally, we are still safe and we are still okay with owning our truth. So I feel, again, it will be up to you, the listener, yourself, myself, people,
Mm-hmm.
to observe what they're activating within ourselves. So if it's a central nervous system response, if it is ourselves all of a sudden second guessing ourselves, which happened to me as well, where I backtracked on some of the things that I said because someone reacted to what I said in a way of like they came across as being someone like a specialist and someone of all this knowledge and expertise, and they criticized something I said, and I would backtrack, or in that time I backtracked and started second guessing myself and making myself really small. But what it was showing in me is that I was not confident with who I am, because when I did go through this and sort of reassess myself and what I did say, I was totally right. I was speaking from the place of truth, but they were coming from a place of control. So their place of control, of trying to control what I was saying and my delivery, made me second guess myself, and made me feel
Mm-hmm.
that I maybe don't know what I'm talking about, and maybe I don't know my inner truth. So they were showing me within myself where I need to believe in myself more and to trust myself. So when you're speaking from your truth, there's no worry, and and this is our society, there's this constant feedback loop that comes to us, that's showing us how much we believe in ourselves, how much we trust ourselves. Someone comes back or someone comes to us projecting anger, then it shows that we have to feel more safe within ourselves doing so and being our true self. And so over time, there were moments where people were projecting their anger, and I was like, oh, I see you. I see what's going on. And it didn't stick. It didn't do anything. But then there were other times when people would project anger or say something to me, and it would give me a different response. So when all of these messages came in, and frequencies and words, how I was feeling within myself gave me a clue of what I needed to work on deeper, so that I wouldn't be affected by it. Right. So really it's going to be dependent on how you feel about yourself in your authentic self. So when
Mm-hmm.
you are in your truth and you've worked through the layers of fear, or well, at the foundation will be fear, but being the inner critic, being hard on ourselves, maybe feeling incomplete, maybe feeling not enough. When we've worked through that, we will feel enough. So if someone's angry, that's their problem. That's on them. We have nothing to do with it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's their issue, and they have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the difficulty comes in is when we're feeling it, but the feeling of it comes from us, again, maybe not feeling safety within ourselves. So when we feel that reaction to someone projecting onto us, we'll have the best way to maneuver through it is tuning inward and seeing where what they are showing within ourself that still remains in our within our deeper self, within our unconscious, within our subconscious, and within our emotional state, or within our belief of maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I'm not safe, right? And so being in our true authentic self is safety, it's purity, it's strength, it's power, it's knowing. And when we connect with that even more, we're able to exercise that more. And what does that actually feel like? So there's a process of become. Actually, I'm just about to upload a video for. I ended up creating 7 stages of awakening, and
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of in order, but of course you can go through. I mean, it's not like a linear thing by any means, of obviously, but um, it was a stage between becoming and awakening. So it's the 6th and 7th stage. So the 6th stage is when we start to own who we are, but we'll go through this many times, many loops over and over and over again until we refine this even more and become even more. So there's a stage I think it was stage 6 of becoming. And then is the awakening. I think is the stage 7 is the awakening. And the awakening is when we have that process of illumination. It's when we realize, it's when we have that shift of ourselves and how we're interacting with situations, or how someone's making us feel, and what that feeling really is, and what it's really showing us. And when we go through these stages and these loops over and over again, the reactions dissipate, the triggers dissipate, we become more of our authentic selves. So that I put in the state for stage 6 is the becoming. So becoming more of ourselves. And this outside noise, yes, people will still be how they are, act how they are, but it won't affect us as much. And actually, I truly feel that when we believe, and when we've become more of ourself, when we believe in our true self, our authentic self, I feel the noise will lessen more and more and more. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
watched certain people in the social media space, and some of them have so much noise around them. So much, like in the spiritual space, so much conflict,
Mm-hmm.
so much projection, so much noise. And it's a reflection, really. You can see it. It's a reflection of what they believe within themselves and how they're projecting themselves into the world. And then you see some people where it's just like the reactions and the comments are completely different. And it
Yeah,
doesn't
I've
mean
seen
that,
it too. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that, you might not get the odd one showing up here and there
Yeah.
creating problems, and that's normal. But again, we are creating our reality at any given moment. And so by seeing these reactions from other people to us is a huge opportunity for change if we see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it definitely answers. I mean, again, it's one of those things that we could go on and on about, just
Yeah.
this like specific thing. But yeah, definitely. I think what I appreciate that you mentioned, because I think it's such a brilliant indicator for us, that like when there's friction, we might not be consciously even aware of as to why or what's actually going on. It's like it's in the body, there's a
Mhm.
discomfort when we communicate or when we, so that alone is so worth looking at, immediately. Just like, what is it? Like, I really want to say this thing. So why the hell am I not saying it? Or why, as I'm saying this is like so uncomfortable. What is this like sort of hitting in me, right? So the other thing you mentioned, I think that's also so important, that like to remember that when we truly speak from that truth, then it comes with no agenda. It really comes from I just want to share. And it doesn't come from like, you have to believe what I'm saying or you have to agree with me. And if you don't, or let alone if you disagree with me, then it's like a big problem, So I think that is like we're really stripped from that. I noticed that I went through a stage where like I was genuinely okay with people having whatever reactions that they're having without like that being massively triggering for me, or filtered through like what does that mean about me, or even like what does it mean how I respond to this, or how should, like I would spend so much time thinking how I should even respond to like a comment or something like this. Like it was just so exhausting. I remember that there was a point where I would have like whatever, I don't care, but actually I wasn't responding because I was afraid of someone's reaction, to rather than not responding because I genuinely didn't care. So seeing that nuance and seeing how I was avoided being rattled by someone, that was also incredibly valuable. So
Totally.
we're basically, the way I see it, Tara, it's like we're like this massive research objects, that it's like for me as a researcher, this
That's
is
true.
brilliant. I find it, our psychology and the way we function is just so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share? And if not, then I think we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, just one more thing, and I don't think I mentioned it, but it keeps popping up, so I think I need to
Mm-hmm.
get this one out there. And it also does tie in with how you comment to people. And I've actually had well, the one video that you and I talked about in the past that got a little bit too much attention there. And people, the odd person would come in with very, very, very strong energy, but strong energy, opinions, anger, even. And I was like right in there. I didn't delete the comment. I didn't report it. I was commenting back, but it was from a different place than where I would have in the past.
Yep.
And it also ties into the mother conversation. So when I had great hatred towards my mother and visceral hatred towards my mother, but also a felt obligation that she was my mother and I still needed to visit her and I still needed to try to make it work and I still needed to keep the peace and I still needed to be a good person. But there inside I just had this hatred. Well, how do you think she felt feeling the hatred towards her? So it's
Yeah.
like and again, I couldn't see it at the time, but now I know why she also reacted in certain ways because I freaking hated her. Like I didn't respect her. I didn't think she was a good person. So if I actually think that about a person and I go into a conversation with them, well, how are they going to react to that? So it's the same in this space of these comments and people's reactions. Like if I don't like you because you talk to me this way, well, I'm going to react to that person in probably that type of manner.
Yeah.
And they're going to react back because they're going to feel hurt. So, again, we all have a responsibility on this planet. I don't care what the hell's going on in people's lives. Like, it's not okay to project onto other people. It's not okay to dump your hatred onto another person. It's not okay. And we do this because we are wounded. But I feel we also need to get to a place where we need to be accountable for, and I don't mean to say it harshly, but I think we need to come to a point at some point where we're being aware of how we are interacting with one another. And it doesn't mean that we don't have a right to voice our opinions. It doesn't mean that we don't have a right to, say what we need to say, and that's
Mm-hmm.
important. But just be aware of the other person and how what we say might make them feel. And I feel, even myself, I've done it. I've commented back where I've been like super tripped up and I've caught myself and I'm like, oh, I didn't like how I acted that way. And I just, like had to like, backtrack and recoil a bit and make some changes within myself. And that's really how we can evolve and how we can make these changes is by being aware of ourselves and what we're doing and how we're reacting and not being hard on ourselves, but just again, where is it coming from? And the more we get into it, the less we'll respond in these visceral ways. And so when I was responding to these people recently who were very angry, I was speaking clearly to them. I wasn't coming from a place of being emotionally reactive
Mm-hmm.
like I would in the
Mm-hmm.
past. And it changed the conversation. Like actually a few of them actually I had dialogue with, back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't like they would come back at me and I would temper it and I would talk to them with more compassion, not like, way out there bypassing stuff, but like real. And it would alter the conversation and it would take it down and take it down and take it down. So, yeah, I feel, at some point, and I don't, yeah, like I don't mean to be very direct with we all have to be accountable and we all have a responsibility, but we do. But the only way we're going to get there is by being self-aware and taking accountability for our own work. And through that work, we'll change these interactions because they're going to keep coming up and they're going to still be around us. And at the end,
Yeah.
we're the ones who can do something about it.
Yeah. And to me, honestly, Tara, it just, to be honest, take all the in-depth conversations away, and it's quite simply about maturity.
Yeah,
Because responsibility is maturity in a
yeah.
way. And I know it's like, as a Sagittarius rising, the word maturity would like freak me out because like I never want to grow up, or anything like, right? But actually, no, there's something really beautiful. I see beauty in maturity and actually in responsibility, funnily enough. So I can simultaneously talk about no doer and no self and talk about responsibility and maturity in the same breath, because to me I see no contradiction in the two at all. I love when you mention like responding to these people, because not that long ago, because not many people know that I'm kind of interested in like international affairs, and there are certain things in the around the world that actually very much interest me into like what's going on. And there are certain YouTube channels that I watch where those things are being discussed, and I tend to, for whatever reason, to like navigate, like, not navigate. I tend to be attracted to like channels where I not necessarily hear people who think the same way. I'm actually way more interested in hearing people that are thinking differently to me,
Hmm.
and understanding why they think that, and like be more open to it. So that's a completely new attitude for me as well. That's like an outcome of this whole journey. And there was this one evening, there was this guy, and we completely, this is like a massive issue that's internationally, like now, pretty much every day on the news. And he had views on that and I had my views on that, and he questioned me and sort of like criticized, slash attacked me a little bit for what I said in the comments, right? And normally I would have like this visceral reaction, heart pumping, and I would be like out of there, or I would try to like sweat to like, how do I respond to this? So I still feel smart. Because it's like this whole, again, going back to the curating the self
Hmm.
image that you have to uphold. And honestly, Tara, instead, I was like, actually, I don't agree with what he's saying, but here he's got a point on this one, And so I literally responded to tell him just that, and we literally ended up discussing this thing for like
Hmm.
an hour. This was the first
Nice.
time that I spoke to someone who's on a completely different side. Maybe not extremely different, but definitely very different from where I'm looking on this particular issue. And we both agreed and disagreed. It was incredible. But the key was that from the beginning, he was a bit sharp. He was slightly, with an attitude,
Hmm.
but he was not disrespectful. He was clearly open to dialogue. Okay. He was not there to just, he was clearly open to hearing my view, even though he disagreed with it. And it was mutual. And to me, that was the key. and the
Yeah.
reason why I stayed, because it was worth it. And I learned a lot from him. He mentioned that he learned a lot from me, but we continued to disagree throughout. And in the end, my last comment to him was, I literally thanked him, and I said this was one of the most enjoyable disagreements I have ever had on the internet, and like genuinely thank you, because this was like, it actually forced me to think. It forced me to to listen in ways that I've never listened to someone who thinks differently before. So overall, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend
Mm.
it. It's so good, and I love seeing when this happens in spaces online as well, where people say something maybe not nice or attacking, and someone jumps in and is like, "Let's talk about that." And then this whole
Mm.
conversation evolves, and it's like, wow, this is how minds change. This is how we evolve, and it's just incredible. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a long-winded ending for me, but yeah, Tara, again, thank you so much for this conversation. Again, like I mentioned before, this is a massive topic with layers and layers, but obviously there's not enough time to cover it all. Still, thank you for coming in, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And what I really appreciate about you is that you're speaking both from the knowledge of the things that you studied, but also from the things that you lived through. And so that makes it really, really valuable. And I hope it's valuable for people listening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I always enjoy these conversations. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye.